Welcome to the Chinese Econograf, a new color-coded graphic model of the Chinese economy, starting with the households and the private sector. It uses graphic shapes and colors to explain the major sectors and interactions of the economy from a unique graphic perspective. The Chinese household, in color-coded brown, supplies labor to the first firm, shown by the brown arrow, and receives income as a green wages arrow. The second firm supplies products shown by the color-coded turquoise arrow, and receives payment as a green arrow in return mono. This indicates the household's dual function as part of the circular flow in the private sector. In this illustration, a Chinese household is shown shopping and paying for products in the retail private sector. The turquoise products arrow and green payment arrows depict retail transactions. This continuous exchange between the brown households and the turquoise firms creates the retail market conduit, where the animations represent transactions and economic flows. Private sector diversity has declined recently, as large public companies such as Alibaba and state-owned enterprises have survived and prospered. Additionally, government policies and reduced disposable income have reshaped the competitive landscape, reducing the number of private retail firms. These graphics highlight the Chinese non-retail private sector in a darker shade of aqua from the turquoise retail sector. A householder is shown working for a state-owned enterprise in the construction industry, which is part of the non-retail private sector. This work is illustrated by the gray arrow and the corresponding wages by the green arrow. The animations in the white border around the aqua area represent some of the non-retail markets for state-owned enterprises and their transactions. As of May 2024, China's private sector comprises approximately 96.4% of the country's total business entities, totaling 180.45 million private businesses. This includes nearly 55.18 million private companies and over 125.27 million self-employed businesses. These graphics display the private sector firstly in plan view, where the brown household sector is on the periphery. The retail sector is on the inside, and the non-retail sector is at the center in a darker aqua. Both sectors are separated by white gaps, representing retail and non-retail markets. The core of the non-retail sector is the large state-owned enterprises, or SOEs. In the elevation view above, we demonstrate that the non-retail sector has enjoyed 10% growth, while the household sector and the retail sector have declined relatively due to reduced retail sales. Here we enlarge the non-retail private sector to show the state-owned enterprises and most of the other types of industry and commerce that are contained within it. The services component sits in the middle of the shape, as it is the common aspect of most commercial activities. Almost all firms provide services to other firms, and some to households, while many others receive services as part of their expenses. Some of the state-owned enterprises, such as State Grid Corporation and China Mobile, are technically part of the public sector, but we are concentrating on the majority of the firms. The real estate sector had been the main growth industry in China's economy, but it is now in decline as prices drop and households suffer from a fall in income, savings, and assets. Prices of some apartments have suffered losses of 40% or 50%, but there has been signs of recovery, with a 5% improvement in Shanghai. Real estate used to make a 30% addition to the economy. However, it's no longer so important as export growth replaces its contribution. Here we show the Chinese private sector in a trading format. China is the world's largest exporter and a leading importer, with total goods imported reaching approximately $2.59 trillion. On the other side, China's total exports for 2024 were valued at approximately $3.55 trillion, marking a 7.1% year-on-year growth compared to 2023. China is still the top exporter of manufactured goods, including electronics, machinery, textiles, and automobiles. The difference between exports and imports is China's current account surplus of $147.7 billion in the third quarter, and exceeding $900 billion annually, stems from strong exports and reduced imports. These graphics illustrate the two-way trade between China and Australia. China exports electric vehicles to Australia, and China imports iron ore from Australia. The iron ore is shown arriving at the Chinese imports interface at the lower left-hand corner. Payments for these imports is shown as a green arrow leaving the imports interface. Now let's have a look at China's exports at the other end. The electric vehicles are shown leaving the exporter's warehouse tariffs. In the imports market for U.S. coal, the initial supply from the U.S. is depicted by the red supply curve, while Chinese demand is represented by the blue demand curve. In response to U.S. tariffs, the Chinese government imposed a retaliatory 15% tariff on coal imports, which led to higher prices and a decrease in Chinese demand, as shown by the dotted supply to curve. The remains of the Chinese demand is supplied by competitors and is shown by the balance of the blue rectangle. Subsidies. At the other end, we shift the focus to China's electric vehicle EV industry. The graphics display the export market where there is a 10,000 yuan production subsidy that effectively lowers the supply price of Chinese EVs. This reduction, shown by the dotted red line, makes Chinese EVs more affordable in global markets, leading to increased international demand. In this illustration, we show the animated private sector with the financial flows traveling clockwise around the market conduit. On the left-hand corner interfaces, the leakages of import payments, leaving the economy and taxation collected and transferred into the public sector. At the right-hand corners, the green interfaces show injections of government expenditure and export receipts into the Chinese economy. Here we show China's public sector above the private sector, detailing the fiscal structure of the economy. Public expenditures have risen much faster than GDP growth, and more is expected in the coming years. In 2024, China's GDP was 134.9 trillion yuan, $18.41 trillion, with public expenditures amounting to 28.5 trillion yuan, representing about 21.2% of GDP. Taxation revenues are illustrated on the top left, flowing into the green treasury at the center. Here, bonds are created and sold to the central bank in exchange for cash. Expenditures are shown exiting the treasury and returning to the private sector at the top right interface. Following significant borrowing exceeding 200 billion yuan, China's national budget deficit has expanded beyond the scope of these graphics. In 2024, the official budget deficit was projected at 4.06 trillion yuan, $564.9 billion, equating to 3% of GDP. However, broader assessments, including off-budget activities, estimate the actual deficit to be approximately 10.8 trillion yuan, $1.5 trillion, which is about 8% of GDP. The monetary economy displays the main monetary flows between the banks and financial markets. The graphics list these three different financial flows of the economy. In the center, the capital inflow and outflow of foreign currencies into and out of the financial markets. The arrows at the top display new money flowing to the treasury in exchange for new bonds. The lower arrows show bonds and money flowing to and from both the banks and the financial markets. The graphics also display the assets and liabilities, both public and private, on a graphic balance sheet basis. These graphics introduce the basis for the Chinese balance of payments, which combines the current account and capital account. It demonstrates how capital inflows, green arrows, and outflows, mauve arrows, are required to balance each other to maintain foreign exchange reserves and currency stability. Liquid public assets are shown in light green, while bonds are displayed as a much larger component on the right-hand side. Private assets are shown similarly in light green, while mortgages and liabilities are displayed in pink. Graham Edward Hull is a creative intellectual with widespread business experience that has driven his commercial career. After graduating in economics from Macquarie University, Graham owned and managed several businesses. After retirement and further studies in international economics and finance, Graham began to develop the graphics of what would become the Econograf that he has continually improved over the years. Now, Graham submits the Econograf video through the Econographics channel for consideration and invites expressions of interest from the academic and business communities to take this revolutionary tool to the next level.